The question is, what is the reality of a tech startup making it without taking significant funding early on? And maybe even a little more personal. So like, Kaylin, so your business is growing, you know, all of your businesses are growing. At what point would you take funding, and does it make sense? But maybe first that original one. And John, why don't you start, because you've had the most experience in investing, really. What is the reality of a tech startup making it without taking significant funding early on? How important
and
is
I
that?
just want to say, and boot camps are a different type of business.
That's right.
They're not a fully scalable tech business. This is not fully scalable, so it's important. But a scalable tech business, the reality is that it can be done and it can happen. But there is no doubt that in most tech startups, you'll reach a point where if you do not get working capital from an exterior source, your slope of growth, when you chart it out, will be lower than you want it to be. I just came today from a seed fund's annual meeting and went through portfolio review and saw companies. And it was really interesting to see the inflection point being when they received the capital from a seed fund. The hockey stick started to happen, and that's because the working capital to develop the product a little bit better and to develop the sales team and the sales side of the business, you can start funding it a little bit more. But bootstrapping it for a long time till you really nail things and can really put that money to good use is a smart and wise thing to do. So to get all the way to the finish line without taking any money in a true tech company, very, very rare. If somebody knows of a deal that's going to be that way, I want them to come talk to me first, then you.
Yeah. So, and Kaylin, you've been part of pure tech startups. You're in boot camp now. If you don't have a great network, so the question is kind of, if you don't have a great network, where do you start? What advice would you give? You probably see a lot of people coming through and they're asking about, where do I start with this? And one, we're somewhat limited in the number of VCs in Utah. So what advice would you have for somebody who's wondering where to start?
And you mean start fundraising?
Start connecting with VCs. Okay. So they're saying, yeah, my network is not great. How can I start looking, and where can I start looking for VC money?
Well, I think number one, just to kind of piggyback on what John was saying, I believe that you use funding to scale and not to start. I think some people get confused and they think, I need to get funding so that I can start my company. And obviously, like, that validation piece needs to happen and all that stuff. So assuming that's all in place, I honestly think you start with your product, right? You start with your product and you make sure your product and what you're showing people and what you're selling people on is top notch, right? You need to sell not only like VCs, you need to sell potential co-founders or future employees on the value of your business. But I honestly think networking is kind of earned a bad reputation because we all think like it's suits standing in a room like, jibber jabbing about just, business. I think true networking is building relationships with people, right? It's talking to people and understanding what they're interested in, what they want, and what they, how could you help them? Who could you introduce them to, right? You may have networks that other people don't have. I think you always have value that you can add to a conversation or feedback you can give. And I think the more you do that with people, the more natural connections open up. And then I think just honestly, you have to ask, right? You have to be bold enough with your startup to say, hey, here's what I need. Can you help me? Who can you introduce me to that knows? Who can they introduce me to, right? You have to kind of follow that chain of, if this person doesn't know, they might know somebody, and that person might know somebody, and eventually end up at Sid, and then Sid will help you get the money you need.
There you go. John, can you add to this? So short of you making the introduction, because you know everybody at Peak and Kickstarter and Epic and Pelion, all of these, what advice would you give them in terms of how to start their fundraising and think about it? Because you hear it all the time.
So network is good. If I introduce them to you, you'd probably give them the time of day to talk to them.
Yep.
But you might also roll your eyes and say, I'm not going to do this deal.
And how do you deal with that? When a young entrepreneur comes to you and you kind of know they're not ready, what do you say to get there? Because that's your reputation.
Okay, so before we go talking to you, even though, and this is not a shameless plug for your company, but Peak Ventures is super exciting, a Provo-based seed venture fund. It's so exciting what you guys have done and the activity you've done the last couple of years, and it's a great place to go, but you don't go ill-prepared. You need to really be prepared. When, you get one chance to get with your junior partners or you as a senior partner and get in that room and wow you. And it's one chance, or you're going to say, hey, come back in 6 months, 12 months, let's see where you're at, which is really a no, right?
Yep.
And so you got to get trained, prepared, and talk to people that know, that can prep you, and make sure that you really know how to tell your story well, and that you can show how you, the investor, are going to get lots of money back for the money you put in. A lot of people don't know this. When you invest, you're expecting 10 times your money back,
That's
right?
That's
10
right.
times.
Yep.
So if you put in $100,000 in any one of their companies, you're expecting within a few years, you're going to get $1 million back. And they have to make you believe that's going to happen. And when you do believe that's going to happen, you're really willing to write a check.
That's right.
And that's what it's about. But going in unprepared and not knowing what you're doing is not smart, because you get one chance at a first impression.
Yep.